write a page, you take a week. I see the end before you even speak.
Check.
You're still debating, I'm 10 steps ahead. By the time you blink, I've already fled. Laser focus, mind's in orbit. I decode the game before they sort it. Slow me down, nah, not a chance. I'm the glitch they never planned.
She's too fast. She's too loud.
It's gotta be AI.
Not normal.
We love stories about propaganda, especially when we don't think we're participating in it. There is something almost obscene about the way we love narratives about collective manipulation. We devour them, applaud them, quote them with great solemnity, and then go home with that wonderfully convenient feeling of having been on the right side of the analysis. Wicked condemns the manufacture of a public enemy, the aestheticization of lies, propaganda wrapped up as a legitimate narrative, and yet a huge part of its audience receives it as proof of their own lucidity rather than as an indictment. That is the film's deepest irony, and perhaps its greatest unintentional cruelty. It shows precisely the kind of mechanism all of us participate in, but in a format that is beautiful, moving, and morally signposted enough for everyone to believe they came out of it innocent. We love stories about propaganda, especially when they allow us to think the dupes are other people. And psychology has a name for that little internal laundering operation: the third-person effect, meaning the tendency to believe media messages influence other people more than they influence us. In other words, manipulation definitely exists, of course, but it mostly targets the crowd, the gullible, the less discerning. We, naturally, would have seen right through it. How comforting. What a coincidence. That is exactly where Wicked becomes more interesting than its plot alone. The film is not just about propaganda as a tool of power. It is also about our desire to belong to the side that gets it. But understanding a mechanism does not mean being free of it. Confirmation bias, for instance, pushes people to seek out and interpret information in ways that remain consistent with their pre-existing beliefs, often without realizing they are doing it. Which means a viewer can watch Wicked and come away with exactly the lesson that reinforces the image they already have of themselves. I've always known how to spot unjust narratives. I would never have fallen for that. I would have understood Elphaba right away. In reality, the film is much less reassuring than that. It is not asking whether we can recognize propaganda when it is beautifully stylized inside fiction. It is asking us, much more brutally, how many times in real life we have already accepted simplified narratives because they flattered our side, our taste, our idea of the acceptable victim, and the convenient threat. And this is where social media makes the whole thing almost embarrassingly relevant. The APA notes that misinformation and misleading content spread more easily when they align with personal identity or social norms, when they feel novel, and when they provoke strong emotions. Translation: the more a narrative makes us want to react quickly, morally, publicly, the more likely it is to circulate. We therefore live inside ecosystems that reward exactly what Wicked critiques: collective escalation, moral simplification, the transformation of people into easy symbols to love or hate. We are no longer looking at complex individuals. We are consuming compressed narratives. The victim has to be legible, photogenic, compatible with our sensibility. The enemy has to be clear, convenient, instantly condemnable. Anything that escapes that logic becomes suspicious, tiring, ambiguous, and therefore quickly abandoned. We have industrialized the moral sorting of reality, then gone to see a movie about that process and found ourselves very profound, magnificent. The problem is that once we perceive ourselves as morally lucid people, we sometimes become less vigilant about our own inconsistencies. That is exactly what the literature on moral licensing explains so well. After doing, thinking, or displaying something that supports a positive moral image of ourselves, we may feel implicitly authorized to lower our standards somewhere else. Applied to culture, that produces something fairly grim. Loving a critical work, sharing it, talking about it intensely, can become a way of reinforcing our ethical identity without forcing us to seriously examine our own practices. We feel like we are on the right side because we recognize the system's violence in a film, and that recognition itself sometimes becomes an alibi. A critical narrative does not necessarily transform us. It can also absolve us. That is why Wicked should be received less as a fable about them than as an experiment about us, about our appetite for clean moral figures, about our impatience with complexity, about the way we turn certain victims into icons because they are aesthetically acceptable, while rejecting those who do not know how to perform their own suffering properly. About our ease in hating figures who are too contradictory, too intense, too difficult to sort neatly. The audience does not applaud Wicked because it is stupid. It often applauds it because it is human, which is to say, extremely gifted at turning an accusation into a compliment, a critique into personal proof of moral refinement. And that may be the film's greatest trap. It holds up a mirror, and we spend part of the time admiring the frame. So the real question to leave behind after this episode is not, how does propaganda work? The real question is more humiliating, which is exactly what makes it more useful. What narratives have I already collaborated with because they made the world easier for me to understand? Which figures have I already found obviously sympathetic or obviously alarming because a social, media, or emotional frame had already made them legible to me that way? As long as we keep believing manipulation is something that happens to other people, we will remain wonderfully available for its most elegant versions. If this episode spoke to you, keep the experience going on my website. You'll find the full world of ink and acid there, my books, my essays, my music, and the complete podcast scripts. In other words, enough material to keep reading, rereading, annotating, and above all, quietly dismantling narratives that are far too polished to be honest.
She thinks too big, she moves too quick, not normal.
I write a page, you take a week. I see the end before you even speak.
Check.
You're still debating, I'm 10 steps ahead. By the time you blink, I've already fled. Laser focus, minds in orbit. I decode the game before they sort it. Slow me down, nah, not a chance. I'm the glitch they never planned.
She's too fast, she's too loud,
It's gotta be AI.
not normal.
Who am I? An error, a misfit, a shadow they fear. Who am I? Too quick, too sharp, or just too clear? Who am I? A tempest coated in fire and steel. Who am I? I'm me, and that's too real.
To a slower flow, confidence dripping in every line.
They say I move like I don't belong. I build worlds while they sing the same song. One step, two step, I break the mold. Blueprints burned, I make my own gold. She's working too fast, must be a cheat. Not just a mind, they can't compete. She's got no patience, she's over the top. Not just a vision that won't be stopped.
Too fast, too much,